What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Cody Campbell with High Ground Gaming. Today we are unboxing and reviewing the Annie Pro 2 60% mechanical gaming keyboard. I'm going to start by walking you through the specs. After that, we'll open it up. I'll let you take a look at it. And from there, we'll go to the review portion where I'll give you my thoughts on it. And then we'll go to High Ground Gaming's final score. Stick around. The Annie Pro 2 has two connectivity options. It can either connect wired with a USB Type-C cable, or it can be wireless with one of 4 Bluetooth 4.0 profiles. It also has 3 mechanical switch options. You can either get it with Gateron switches, Kale box switches, or Cherry switches. And the Cherry switches are only available on the website, it looks like. You can get the Gateron and the Kale switches on Amazon as well, where it's a little bit cheaper. It has double shot PBT keycaps. It has RGB. It has customizable macros. It has a feature that they call the Magic FN key, which seems to be using the caps lock button as a sort of secondary function key. We'll have to look into how that works a little bit later once we're in the review portion. It also has something called tap mode for the arrow keys. Basically, the keys in the bottom right-hand corner work as arrow keys when you just tap them rather than holding them down, which makes sense because most of the time when you use arrow key, you're just tapping it to move over a couple spaces. You know, occasionally you'll hold it down, but not that often. So that's something that could be really interesting because arrow keys are something that a lot of 60% keyboards struggle with in my experience. So I'm really excited to see how that turns out. It also has a 1900 milliamp per hour battery and something called ObinsKit Software, which we're gonna play around with and see what features that offers. That's about it for the specs though. Let's open it up. Okay, so the keyboard is right in here, inlaid in this styrofoam. Keep it nice and safe. That looks very nice, but let's see what else is in the box before we examine that too closely. Okay, we've got Annie Pro's quick start guide, and then underneath the cardboard. Interesting, so we have some switches that are in all these different colors, so you can definitely customize your keyboard with a few different color options. They're all very bright and pastel-y, which is an interesting style choice. The cable is bright red, but we've got the USB Type-C to USB Type-A there. It's rubber, but it's not like a cheap rubber. It does feel pretty quality. It is not braided though. And then we've got a keycap remover. All right, that's it. Let's take a look at the keyboard real quick. It's not heavy, but it isn't super light either. Ooh, it is sliding a little bit, but it'd probably be a little bit better on a mouse pad, but I'm a little worried. Yeah, that's really light. It's got these grips on the bottom, but they're just not sticking to this table that well. It'd probably do better on a desk. I did just clean this table. So we have an on-off switch on the back here, and that's pretty much it. Function key is here where it generally is. These are the ones that serve as secondary arrow keys when you just tap them, these 4 right here. All of the secondary functions are printed on the front of the keys in what looks like a very light copper color. And we've got the USB Type-C port on the left-hand side. Here's a little sound test for those Gateron switches. They feel good. They feel a lot like Cherry MX Reds would, maybe a slight bit less tension. Very solid though, not a lot of wiggle or wobble in the keycaps, so that's good. That double shot PBT feels really nice. It's got some texture to it, which is good. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and plug it into my computer, play some games, use it for a little while, and we'll be right back with the review portion. Don't go anywhere. All right, folks, I've spent some time with the Annie Pro 2, and I'm ready to talk about it. But before we get into that, please hit the like and subscribe button. All right, let's start off by talking about the build quality. First of all, I wanna say the grips are fine. I had just cleaned that table with like an oil-based cleaner, and so it was a little slippery on that. But I tried it on my desk, I tried it on a mouse pad, and it's sturdy enough. The casing is made entirely of plastic, but the way the plastic is shaped, it's fairly rigid. There's not a lot of flex to it or anything like that. The PBT keycaps are absolutely great. They feel really good. There's a grippiness to them, a texture that feels really nice to type on. They're very secure, no wiggle, and because they're PBT, they're not going to develop shine as quickly as ABS would. I also wanted to mention that I did play around with the magic function button, which is just the caps lock button. Basically, you hold that down and the caps lock serves as a function key. Also, if you just tap the caps lock to turn on caps lock, it actually can change the color, and you can use the software to set what that color is, which is pretty cool. Also, the tap arrow keys that I talked about before are fantastic. It's just these guys here. You just tap them to use them as arrow keys, or hold it if you want to use it as the shift function, or etc. It works really, really well. I think I only ever tripped up on it once in the 2 weeks that I was using this keyboard, and that was just because I was still getting used to it. I honestly think this is probably the best solution for arrow keys on any 60% keyboard that I've tested. So that's a big pro for this keyboard. Now let's talk about the switches though. I mentioned before that I got this with the Gateron Reds. The Gaterons are the cheapest switch options for this. You can get the keyboard for $75 with one of the 3 Gateron options. It's $10 more for the Kale switches, which also come in red, blue, or brown. And then it's a full $50 more for the Cherry MX switches. And the main reason for that is that you can get these for $75 and $85 respectively on Amazon, where they're a lot cheaper, but the Cherry MX switches can only be purchased on the actual AniPro 2 website, where it's $127. We found that the Kale switches had a really smooth actuation. They're pretty decent switches. The only kind of downside to them is that the Reds had a very low tension, which means that just sort of resting on it, it's really easy to accidentally type a key because there's a very low tension and a very high actuation. Now, if you're looking for really, really fast reaction times, this is actually a really great way to go. But if you're concerned about easy typos, or you just want a more satisfying press to your keys, we'd recommend just spending the extra $10 for Kale. Kale switches are absolutely fantastic. These ones are good. It's just for an extra 10, I think it's worth it for the Kale. I think the Cherry MX is definitely a little too expensive though. In terms of gaming performance, it handled itself pretty well. Wired, it was absolutely fantastic. It was a dream. The key spacing is really comfortable. The reaction times were virtually instantaneous. Overall, it was just a very comfortable and responsive gaming experience. In the wired mode, the only wireless option that this has is Bluetooth 4.0, which does have some latency. Bluetooth is perfectly usable. If you want to play a campaign mode in the average game, Bluetooth is going to be absolutely fine. But when you plug in that USB Type-C cable, you're definitely going to notice a difference. It's going to be more responsive and you're going to notice a lot less latency. That isn't that big a deal in campaigns and most games, really, but if you're playing anything competitive where those millisecond response times really matter, then you're definitely only ever going to want to use this in a wired mode. But to be fair, that's the same for any Bluetooth device. You really need the 2.4 gigahertz connectivity to get the responses that are approaching a wired connection, and this keyboard does not have that option. I used it to play some Doom Eternal, and I had a great time with it. That game actually needs some pretty fast response times, and I didn't really have any issues using the Bluetooth or the wired mode for it. Again, it's really only in hyper-competitive games like Valorant, CSGO, Overwatch, where you're really going to want those millisecond differences. One really useful thing about Bluetooth, though, is that there's 4 different profiles, so you can actually switch between them using the 1 through the 4 keys with the function key. And what that'll do is it will allow you to switch between connected devices. And all you'll have to do is hit the function and the 1, 2, 3, or 4 key to switch to that profile. You won't have to pair it every single time. That can be useful for somebody who's traveling, since this is small. It can fit in a backpack and you can pair it up to your tablet to take notes in class. Go home, hook it up to your desktop and play some Doom like I did. It's great for stuff like that. It's just not the fastest connection, that's all. Now we're gonna talk about the ObinsKit software. And that, I think, is maybe the weakest thing about this keyboard. It's not terrible. It does give you quite a few options, actually. You can adjust key sensitivity, you can set key mapping, you can set macros, you can do all kinds of really nice stuff to customize this to your specific needs. The problem that I encountered is that it's a little bit buggy. Some of the settings don't work quite the way they're supposed to. For example, this has a sleep timer on it, and you can set the sleep timer from anything from, I think it's 1 minute to 60 minutes. And so when you stop using it after whatever amount of time you set it to, it should go to sleep and the RGB should turn off when it's in Bluetooth mode. It didn't really work for me. No matter what I set the timer to, the keyboard would automatically go into sleep mode after literally like 2 seconds of me not using it. The only way that I could get it to stay on was to turn the timer off altogether, which means that if I want to use this in Bluetooth mode and I don't want the battery to die from me leaving it on 24/7, I have to use the switch in the back to turn it off and on every time I want to use it. And the problem with that is that when you turn the keyboard off from Bluetooth mode, it no longer pairs to that software. You have to return the software on and repair the keyboard to it. And so even things like lighting will not turn on until you do that if you flip the switch on the back, which is kind of irritating. The lighting options weren't all that great either. There's only 7 moving lighting options, and they're kind of limited. You can't control speed, you can't control direction. You can control brightness a little bit, but this is as bright as it goes, which is fine. It's pretty good. It's not the brightest I've seen, but it's not dim either. It's got pretty good looking RGB on there. One cool thing about it is that you can limit color spectrums. You can actually select what color spectrum you want to move across the keyboard. So I have it currently set to rainbow, but there's also breathing and other stuff like that. And with this, I didn't want the yellows, the greens, or the oranges or anything like that. I just wanted red, blue, purple, pink. And so that's what I set it to. And as you can see, it only moves through those colors, which I think is pretty cool. I wish more keyboard softwares offered that feature because a lot of people have a specific color palette and they want to be able to customize their devices to match. So even though you don't have a lot of options, you do have some customization in terms of color within those options, which is kind of neat. Now that we've talked about all that though, let's get down to the verdict. So as I mentioned before, the Annie Pro 2 is $75 for the Gateron switches on Amazon. It's $85 for the Kale switches on Amazon. And you can only get the Cherry MX switches on the actual website, and that's $127. Now, we think the Cherry is too expensive, but we think that the Gateron and the Kales are pretty reasonably priced given the level of build quality, the wireless options, and just the quality of the switches, really. Those are very good switches for that price point. So keeping all that in mind, we decided to give this a flat 4 out of 5. Pretty impressed with it. The software could be better. There are some competitors to it, but honestly, most of the keyboards that have a better build quality than this are significantly more expensive or don't offer wireless options. Most of the wireless keyboards that are more affordable than this do not live up to this build quality or the options that come with it. So in that respect, this is a very fairly priced keyboard and we think it's a pretty good deal. That's about it for us today though, folks. Why don't you go ahead and drop down in the comments and let us know what you think. Is this keyboard worth the money, or are there some features you wish it had that it doesn't that would make it worth the price? While you're at it, please hit the like and subscribe button. We've got lots more content coming real soon and we'd hate for you to miss any of it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Happy gaming.